on Sunday coming. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your goodness, your kindness. We thank you for your grace, for the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. We thank you because you continually take the things of Christ and for showing them unto us. And we are honored just to be in your midst and in your presence this day. Let the word of God, Father, saturate our hearts and our minds completely, I pray thee. Amen. Okay. Questions from anyone before we get started? We're talking about how to perfect our life. And I think the perfecting of our life covers a multitude of things. We started to talk about leaders and followers past Sunday. Anybody remember what we said about leaders and followers? Some of the things that are that makes them stand out? Okay, let's just do a little recap then. The leaders are usually identified with other people's strength and is impressed with their courage in resisting mediocrity. What's mediocrity, by the way? What's mediocrity? Yes.
I actually looked that up this week, and I had a question about that, so
Okay.
I guess it's perfect.
Well, ask a question then while you do
Okay, so the definition of mediocrity says it's neither good or bad, it's below average.
Right.
That was a dictionary's definition.
Okay.
And then Sunday, part of you were saying that leaders don't accept mediocrity,
Right.
which I understand, so you don't accept below average. But what if there are people who are above average, but they make mistakes here and there? Is that the same? Are you categorizing that as the same as mediocrity?
No, it's just when good people do bad things, we could say sometimes. It's not because they are embracing mediocrity. It's the fact that they get caught up within the sway of going backward and forward. Because if you put a bunch of people, and we always have in a group of people, some are a little, because they're smarter than others, some are a little more well-learned than others. One of the things about it is knowing how to balance so that you can teach both at the same time. And sometimes people cannot embrace both at the same time and not become one, in the sense of being mediocre. Because again, and that goes again to the fact of, is this a leader or is this a follower? And even though most people want to think of themselves as a leader, in most cases they're not. Leaders sometimes are, when we mention that from a different perspective in Scripture, we put it this way in the past. A person who is gifted is different from a person who is talented. However, a person who's gifted can be a born leader, while they have people who are gifted who are trained. They can be trained. Again, in Corinthians, not Corinthians, but Timothy, where Paul writing to Timothy, he says, if any man desire the office of a bishop. Notice now, he says desire. Well, he didn't say who's gifted. So then you can desire a leadership role and you can aspire for that, but you're not going to be the gifted leader. And it's the same thing with a person who maybe traffics more in mediocrity, but they understand what excellence is, but because they don't have the leadership quality, they really don't want to stand out. So then they really don't, we could say, stand up for what is, if we say we're going to start at 8, they go, okay, well, I guess, 8:15 will be fine. Instead of starting at 8, never if they are the only one there. So you said they don't want to stand out. A person who is not really a leader finds it hard to make decisions. They are They fluctuate, they find themselves in situations where they would rather not make decisions. And leaders make decisions. Followers do not like to make it, but they do it reluctantly. But in their minds, I don't want to be hard. It's not about hard. If you want to talk about hard, talk to God. He has got one way. That's it. Everybody got to do it that way, no matter who you are. Sooner or later, he says, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. So we can do what we want to do right now. Fudge it one way or another, but then sooner or later, it's going to be his way. That's it. You don't find that with a follower. A follower usually, one of the terms we use, they say they forgive. The idea to forgive is to also to indulge. They make allowances when they should not make allowances, because you see, you don't make too many allowances and achieve anything. You don't. You're going to have to know what is truth or what is right and stay with it. And that's it. So, yeah, we have, and that's why we start off with leadership and followers. When we're dealing with mediocrity or what is excellence or what is a person who strives for the good. Again, leaders cannot manage. Well, let's put it this way. The person who is a gifted leader can manage a lot of people. The person who's a trained leader can't manage more than around 10 people. They can't go beyond 10 if they're a trained leader. If you're gifted, yes, you can. Is that helping you anything?
Yes, using the example that you gave about a leader who may not, the time to start, I'll just say class is 8 o'clock, and they don't start till 8:15 because no one's there. Okay, say they do that one time, and the person that they're accountable to corrects them, and they don't do that anymore. Are they mediocre, or are they still exceptional? I think people just, when we hear the word mediocre, we're not really sure what that means too, as it relates to the ministry. So that's why I looked it up.
Right.
It's mediocre when you make one mistake or two mistakes, or?
No, I don't view things in terms of mistakes.
Okay. Or
No more.
misstep, or whatever it is, or you don't do
Yeah.
something precisely the way that the expectation or standard is. You miss it.
Right. Because when you think of it, the idea of, to use the word sin, sin doesn't mean you make a mistake. Did you know that?
Okay.
Sin means, the Greek word for sin is called hamartia, which is to miss the mark. To miss the mark. So then I don't think in terms of the way some people think. Okay? So I say a person missed the mark. Okay. But did you know that there was a mark there? And it's on that basis that then I says, okay, we'll give you another opportunity. And then I look at qualification. Like we say, you can't get a out of a, so then I have to look at your qualification. Are you qualified for this? So that I may be demanding more of you than you are qualified to do. So then that would be a mistake that I'm making, and not what you're making. Is that happening? Now, I know there's a lot of questions in this area. I don't know if you're thinking about them, okay? But I think you should, because your level of performance will always go to your level of leadership, your level of performance, and the people that you work with. Because you see, it's not enough to know, for instance, like when I teach what I know. I think that's a secondary thing. Is am I able to get you to learn or to know what I know, which we're going to deal with that aspect of what's called communication, okay? Because it's not just me saying stuff, and that's why talking is important, but it's not the most important thing to do. I think listening is more important than talking, okay? But some people do not think it is. But now, how do we listen? Do we listen critically? Do we Do we listen so that we may understand, or we just listen so that we may say, I'm collecting information? And as believers, we should be listening to do what? How are we listening? So that our lives will be transformed. So we're learning. See? Okay. So then, leaders as followers. We says, again, followers are usually deal with forgiveness because they always try to make all kinds of allowances and excuses. And these are leaders because then they feel that they're justified. I didn't say they have an explanation, a viable one. They make an excuse. While followers, while leaders rather, do not give themselves that latitude of excuses. They do not do that. Therefore, if I give you that I'm not giving myself, that makes me a poor leader. Now, I understand a lot of this goes towards what is called relationship, right? True? That we are always trying to win friends and influence people. Now, the question is, at what expense? Everything you do costs something. Everything. Some of us are realizing that early, some are realizing it late. Because sometimes when we get ready to pay the piper, so to speak, we find out that we can't pay, or the demand is too much. I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they were saying that they leased this place, but then the person who they leased it from did not tell them what the final price was of the introduction of the lease. So it says, you mean you're leasing something and you don't know how much it cost you? What you're paying on? I says, no, you have to settle what this thing's going to eventually cost you. So what you pay in on the lease, that goes towards the purchase price. But they're waiting until they build it up, put a building on it, and then come up with the cost. I says, no, because they know once you put the building on it, you can't take the building and walk off. You got to leave the building there. I said, no, you got to know these things up front. Now, it was obvious that this person was not really a leader, but they were trying and they're doing their best. However, they needed good direction and good help and counsel in that area. Coming late, but then, I don't know what's going to happen, but whenever they say, no, this is what the property is worth, they may hit the roof because they can't very well take up the building and move, so they're going to pay whatever they're going to demand in. Up front, it wouldn't be that way. Now, in relationships, most of the times we're not able to pay what the relationship demands, because like in most cases, some of us go into a relationship not hoping that we'll pay as much as we are paying in it. That's because, like Jesus puts it this way, he says, any man who's going to go and fight another person or to war, he's going to first what? Count the cost before he enters into any venture, lest he starts it and is not able to what? Finish it or complete it. Now, do we count the cost? I don't think so. Now, every cost is not known in the same way every desire is not known. Was not known. But we have to ask ourselves, what am I willing to pay? Even if the cost is more than I estimated, because everything that you do is going to demand more from you than you were initially willing to put in. Everything. Name me one thing that's not true, and I'll show you that is indeed true. So then, let's look at thinking, for instance, because I think in marriage, thinking is an art that needs to be perfected in a lot of cases, is not perfected. Because sometimes we think thinking and reaction are the same thing. But I want to lead you into something this evening. We have got many things here. As a matter of fact, I really didn't have to do anything new in preparing for this class or for the class of Marriage and Family. You know what I did? I went back and I digged up some of my notes. I found some notes of 1998. So that's what I'm teaching from, notes from 1998. These are some of the things that we taught before that we're going to rehearse again. Okay, from 19, let me see, it's 19, I was 1997, 98, yeah. 1997, 98, that we're going to talk about. Thinking is communication, or thinking involves communication, which is intellectual or objective unity. It has to do with cause and effect. And if I'm saying too much, you let me know. We go back and we deal it again. Thinking involves communication. It involves intellectual and objective unity, cause and effect. It's a kind of analysis that we do. Now, how many people know how to think? I didn't say what to think, I said how to think. I just gave you some pointers on that. We could say thinking involves what? Communication, right? Speaking is not necessarily communication. We do a lot of speaking, and we do not communicate at all. So who wants to jump in here? Remember now, this class is not just me talking to you, it's we talking to each other. Yes? All right. Let's talk about the word that most people want to talk about. Oh, we just don't communicate. You hear it all the time, right? I believe it's incorrect, but you say it, and I hear people say it all the time. Why do I think it's incorrect? Anyone?
I believe people are always communicating whether they speak a word or not. Because as you said, your spirit goes before you, but they're nonverbal actions that are saying things, or so it's not necessarily talking.
So then are you saying then that there is a negative communication and positive communication which involves speaking? Okay, we all agree with that? Because communication, it has to do with what I want you to know and what I want you to do. It has to do with what? What I want you to know and what I want you to do.
That's
yes.
The definition of communication.
It involves that. Right. Yes.
For myself, I think communication is, we are always communicating, but whether the other person thinks what you're communicating is important or important enough to react or listen to is a whole different thing, you know. We got to make sure that what the other person is communicating, take it as an important because it's important because they took the time to communicate it to you, you know. So we need to be mindful enough to know that, okay, this is important, you know, because we're always communicating. Even if you don't say anything is communicating.
So again, it's bad or good communication?
So, yes.
Bad or good communication?
Yes.
Okay.
We just have to make sure that we realize what the other person is saying is important.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me give you a little example, and let's see how we do with that. Let's say you called downtown and you want to speak to electronics store. And you want to find it from them if they have something that you want, and what you're trying to say to them, they do not know what you're talking about. Are we communicating? Now you see, that's not communication to me. Communication is what I want to say to you, you're going to understand. What I want that you have, so we can have what's called dialogue about it. Okay? And that's why I'm saying, again, just think, if there was real good communication, what we try to say to each other, the only thing that would be necessary is to clarify, to make sure what I'm saying and what you're saying, that we are on the same page. But you see, I can say something to different people, and a lot of things are going to enter the mix. If I talk to a man and I try to communicate, he's going to hear completely different than if I speak to a woman. You know why? Anybody here know why?
Yes.
Tell me why.
Because we understand differently.
Yeah, we understand different. When a woman hears a word, what happens?
She feels the word. She feels it.
Yeah, she's feeling something through her emotion by the words that you say. When a man hears a word, he what? His analytical mind goes in.
Right.
And he's trying to analyze what you've said. So what you say to a woman, the same thing say to a man, they're going to understand it differently because their gender sometimes trips in. And she feels what you say, while he may hear what you say. And when she feels it, she interprets it completely different, what you said. Example, a husband said to his wife, honey, please take out the garbage. And he says, okay. In his mind, later on, in his mind, I want it done now. In her mind, I want it done now. Tell me if I'm wrong. That's why you hear around the house, you hear the man says, I have some honeydew things. And she's going to say, oh yeah, they've been honeydew for the past year. True or false? Okay, because as far as she's concerned, she wants it what, done. At home, I spoke to someone this evening, a man, because my wife, she brought in a brochure. And they said, I know what was happening, but I just wanted to make something understood here, which I'll tell you later. And it's a coupon for window cleaning. And she has said to me for the past 2 years, honey, can we clean the windows? I'm like, oh yeah, have them cleaned. 6 months, a year passed, nothing done. So now she brought the coupon home now. It's a discount coupon. She says, now we can get this windows clean. But it's in her mind, she wanted it done 2 years ago. Okay? And I'm making her to understand, I heard you then. I don't need for you to tell me 5 and 6 times. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't have it done. Because you see, a woman have an idea that if I say it enough times, I'll get it done. And it's called what? It's called what? Anybody? Nagging. There you are, ma'am. It's called nagging. And I don't need to hear it that many times. Now, it's very important for us to understand relationship that the man never enters the woman's world, but she must enter his world in order for there to be unity. You heard a woman say, well, my husband's a good man, he does everything, that's what he needs to do. And then what she really means is, he does everything I tell him to do. That's why he's a good man, because he does everything I tell him to do. But if he didn't, guess what? He'd be hard to work with. Now you say, I'm not taking sides. I'm talking, you could say, out of both sides of my mouth, both to the man and to the woman. And what I'm trying to make us understand is that there's always a better way than some of the bad things that we have learned concerning relationships. That's why there's so much fluctuation and it vacillates, and we are in and we are out, and we are going out to all this great turmoil that's happening because we're not doing it the right way. And even in doing it the right way, the only way we do it the right way, we have to learn what the right way is, then we can do it the right way. So the communication piece is a big piece. Yes.
What do you mean, Pastor, when you say we don't enter into their world, but they enter into ours? Because that could be taken a lot of different ways, I think.
I can give you an idea. In Paul writing to the Corinthians, let me see, we find it first. That's not a sexist statement, okay? Okay, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And I said in a sexist way because a lot of guys take it in a very sexist way, and that's not what it is. I'm giving it to you from a scriptural point of view, okay? Okay, let me read it first. Paul is dealing with, if you look at verse 1, he says what? Be what? Followers or imitators of me, even as I am of what? Christ. Now, just by looking at that before you read the rest, what is he talking about? Yes.
To follow his example to follow his example as he's imitating Christ.
Yeah. However, we could spiritualize that, right? And we could say, that's all it's talking about, right? But this is not. Because Paul was what? Single. So then he's saying, I just don't want you to imitate my spiritual growth in Christ, but I want you what? To also imitate my life as a single person, or to follow me. He's not saying, don't get married, that's not what he's saying. He's just saying what? Which we're going to look at later on down here. He says what? I praise you, brethren, that you what? Remember me in all things, and keep the ordinance or hold fast to the traditions as I delivered unto you. In verse 8 he says what? But I would have you to what? Know. Why would he say that? What I would have you to know. Is it the fact then that they had a completely different philosophy? Could that be that? That they had a completely different take on the subject? Yes. They had a completely different take and philosophy on this whole subject matter. And then he's saying, no, I would have you to know. What would I have you to know? What would I have you to know? Look at the verse. What did he say? What? I can't hear you. Let's give her a mic if she's going to read it then. I would have you to know. What would I have you to know?
That the head of every man is Christ.
Right. It didn't say the man, did he? Did he? So that when it comes to men, he's not talking to married men, right? He's talking to men in general. True? So then Christ is the head of what? Every man, no matter who you are, married or single. And he goes on and he says what?
Read it. And the head of the woman.
He used the, which means what? Married woman. You see that now? The head of the woman is what?
Is the man.
The man. So then he says, God is the head of every man, no matter who you are, single or married. But when it comes down to married, he says what? The man is the head of what? Come on, read it.
And the head of Christ is God.
No, you see, you're going ahead. He says that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of what?
Every woman.
The woman is the man. So, but they say a lot of women who are married do not want the man to be what? But the moment you're married, he becomes the head. Now, he can be capitated by the woman or by the family or whatever, but that doesn't mean that he's not a man, because you look at any man who's decapitated, whether he's alive or, in this case he would be dead, and you check out his physical form, he would still be what? A man. Are you understanding this? No, that needs to be understood. This order needs to be recognized if you're going to do it God's way. Which means what? The man is beholden to God. And now, if he is indeed beholden to God, God's going to give him certain directives and certain counsel that will help him to understand how to manage his wife and how to manage a family. So then you say, when Paul says, I'll have you to know, he's saying, I want you to get away from those traditional beliefs and those traditional things that were taught to you that is incorrect. Now, you're reading it, and I'm reading it, and if you think I'm telling you something different, which we're going to go into some more, you let me know. Now, we're going to deal with the idea of the woman enters into his world. I'm just going to jump to the verse that will deal with it, and then we can deal with it if you want to, other verses in between, because you see, this is what we call spring training. This is what we call basic things. If you do not have the basic things on a lot of things, it's like people can read, but they have a big problem with comprehension. So reading is not all there is. You've got to have comprehension. It goes along with it. Okay? Now, and you let me know if you think I'm taking sides or being one-sided, which is not my intent. I'm just going to give you the pure, unadulterated Word of God, and then you decide what you're going to do with it. Okay? Now, he goes on and he says what? Every man praying and prophesying, having his head what? Covered, dishonoreth what? No, say God. Because the head of every man is God. So if you dishonor, even you use the word praying or prophesying, which means what? We say a man can't lead if he doesn't speak. To pray or to prophesy means you got to speak. And in this case, you use that because what? You're supposed to be praying to God concerning your relationship, how to manage it, how to take care of it, because every relationship needs to be managed. Every single one. Some more than others. Why? Why? Anyone? Why? Some people are just what? Men or women, so this is not just one person. Some people are just what? High maintenance. They're what? High maintenance. That's the way they are. They weren't born that way, but that's the way they were either trained or that's the way they learn to what is called manipulate relationships. So they become what? High maintenance. Okay. So every man speaking or praying or prophesying, having his head, and he used the word head, covered, and Paul is talking about, we could say, let's say covering the head with a burqa, with a hat, with a napkin, whatever a woman used to cover their head with, and they think, oh, we can't go into church unless we have our head covered. That's not what he's talking about. That's what he's talking about at all. Because you're going to see where Paul says, we have no such custom in this place. See that? No, but he says what? Having or recognizing the man as her head. If you do not recognize him as your head, you'll never recognize his position and his function. It will not happen. And once that happens, the level of dishonor starts to go through the roof. And you do not put him in a position to either hear from God either. Because a lot of guys can hear from God if we have the woman who understands her role as well as he understands his role. So then, the man is to facilitate God, and the woman is to facilitate the man. Did you know that? All right. Let's go to this verse we're talking about then. In verse number 7, it says what? For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, forasmuch as he is what? The image and the glory of God. But the woman is the glory of what? The man. You see that? Oh, that's a whole lot of stuff he's saying here in verse 8. For the man is what? Which means what? Okay. For the man is not as a woman, but what? The woman what? So then, what is he saying?
Man was not created for a woman.
Pardon me?
Man was not created for a woman.
Right. 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 So that in order for her to understand her real role in the eyes of God in society, she has to what? Enter into his world. Not he going into her world. Neither was the man created what? For the woman, but what? He was created for God. But what? But the woman for the man, which means what? She was created as long, no, it's not. Every woman is not created for every man. But when you're married, what? She's created for him. Yes, go ahead.
What do you mean when you say the woman go into the man's world?
You have too many guys who are feminized by women. Which means, if mama ain't right, nothing is right. You heard that, right? Not true. Now you say, I may be casting on sacred cows, but not true. What is true is what? If daddy ain't right, nothing is right. Which means what? She has to enter into his world and understand, there's this movie that they made years ago by Rex Harrison. I think it's called My Fair Lady, I think. Anybody have seen it? And one of the songs in there is, why can't a woman be like a man? The point of this is, she needs to understand how he is thinking if they're going to become one. Because it says she needs to be one with him and he not one with her. Yes.
I was just going to add something, because what you said is obviously right about, if the man is not right, then nothing will be right, because if he's not right with God and all that kind of stuff, following Christ, then nothing will be right. Mm-hmm. Now that quote though comes from a selfish saying. The saying goes, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. Mm-hmm. So we wouldn't want to turn that around and say, if daddy ain't happy, nobody's happy, because it's coming from the same selfish motivation.
No, the point I'm trying to say is, if God ain't happy, nobody can be happy. That's the point I'm coming from.
I got you.
If God ain't happy, you and I know, if God ain't pleased, you're not going to be able to please anybody. And that's the point I'm coming from. In saying that, you see, because every bit of information that has been dispensed that society have learned over the years from Adam all the way down has been completely perverted, and it's all designed to destroy the things of God. All of it is, every bit. And that's why when Jesus talks about you being born again, being born again has to do with now you're going to have a new teacher who's going to now teach you from scratch, because everything you know you learn. Every single thing. And he says what? He will teach you, he will lead you, he will guide you into what? Oh, truth. So then, Is the inference indicating that what we have could be error? Yeah. Now, this may seem like a very hard thing, but I contend what Jesus says. Only the path of the transgressor is hard. Because Jesus says what? My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Understand now. This done correctly, I believe a woman needs to be honored. Even what Peter says. Listen to what he says here. In 1 Peter chapter number 3. In verse number 6, it says what? Who wants to do the reading?
Even as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose daughters ye are,
Or children are descendant by faith.
as long as ye do well.
Notice now, don't forget that. As long, only as long as you what? Do well and are not afraid with any amazement or distortion of the information from God. Next verse is what? Likewise, which means in like fashion. So he's not just talking to Sarah, he's talking to the man also, right? Likewise, what? Ye husbands. He didn't say you men, did he? Did he? No. He says you married men, right? You husbands, what? Dwell with them according to what? Knowledge, which means there's a lot of things that men need to know that they don't know. Dwell with them according to what? Knowledge. Notice now, giving honor unto his wife or the wife, which means what? There's a lot of honor that she's due that he needs to give to her. As unto what? Don't let that word throw you. Weaker vessel. Yes? And as what? Being heirs. Notice now. So that if she's the weaker vessel and you're heirs together, guess what? If you interpret this the way it is, as just somebody being, let's say, physically or mentally weak, and you're heirs together, that means what? You're only as strong as what you're, the saying says, well, you're only as what? Strong as they?
Which is weak.
That means what? You're both then what? In a devastated weak condition. So we know he's not speaking about weaker vessel in that sense. The weaker vessel has to do with the fact that what? She needs to enter into his world. That's what he's talking about. In order for them to be one. And not because she's intellectually crippled. No, because most women are smarter than most men anyhow. It's just that most men maybe might just be a little wiser. Because if you really think about it, women run the world, but they have a manager. Folks, my dealings with people in the world, I find that women are much smarter, they're more intelligent, they work harder, they prove themselves a lot more than men any day of the week, hands down. And I would never want to be without a woman in my life to help me. Because I cannot rely upon men to do that. It's factual. Factual. So I know they're not weak. Because all the women I deal with in my personal life in the ministry, they have strength that I don't have. But what? I capitalize off this strength to get the job done. Okay, how are we doing? Question? So then, their ears together with us, right? Yes? Yes? This class is so quiet. I think we ought to be so happy about this thing. This is not some of the doldrum. No, this is a good thing. I hope you know that. It's like anything else. Once you know the rules, guess what? You're okay. If you don't know the rules, then that's when you really need to be afraid. True? Yes? Okay. Okay, let's look at Corinthians again. That's what we talk about. So then he's talking about cover as in what? The man what? Covering the woman covering her head as what? Her head. Her husband, right? That's the covering he's talking about. Yes? Okay, anybody have any more questions along this line here? We can talk a lot more about these verses if you want to, if you care to. Or we can move on and talk about the whole concept of communication. How do we do this? Because it involves what? What I want you to know and what I want you to do. And we're going to talk some more about the purpose for communication is unity, to unite. That we find some level of common ground, that we identify with agreement and oneness. All of these things we do when it comes to communication. But we can get back up and talk about the thinking part that promotes a lot more communication. Because you see, we need to learn how to think. And when you start thinking, you will what? Respond and not react. When you start thinking, you will what? Respond and not react. What's the difference? What's the difference? Now you say, you should know that. If you don't, I would have you to know. No.
I think whenever you react, you are usually led by your emotions.
Yes.
React to something.
Right. I mean, you respond.
So it's more, you think about it.
You're thinking, you're processing things. Mm-hmm. Right. And you can tell also a person who reacts usually what? They're quick in the trigger. They talk so much and they're not really thinking about it because they're speaking out of their emotions. Now, again, thinking in communication involves, again, intellectual objective unity. Okay? It has to do with what? Cause and effect. It's a type of analysis that we do. Anybody wants to flesh that out somewhat of what you understand from that? Okay, we'll give you a word then, so to help you along the way. If I say, let's discuss this thing, what am I saying? I didn't say it was disgusting. I says, let's. I says, let's discuss. What am I saying?
Let's talk about it.
Talk about it, yes. Dialogue, right. Because you see, I know we do more talking about it, but does that yield any fruit in most cases? When I think of discussing something, I think of conversation or to consider this matter. Discussing it has to do with a conversation and to consider when I think about discussing something. Now, I'm saying that because right away we go, yeah, let's talk about this now, and we just go off, right? And we usually end up at loggerheads, right? I understand something different than you understand because you see, men and women are two unique individuals, and what we're trying to do is what? Take a round peg and a square peg, and we're trying to fit them, right? And something got to happen. What has to happen when you have a round peg and a square peg?
Shave the edges.
Huh?
Got to shave the edges.
They got to be shaven, man. The point is, well, who's going to shave and who's going to do the shaving? Isn't that the case, usually? Yeah. I ain't taking down, this is what I believe, this is what I think. Well, and we go back and forth, right? All right. Now, if I use the word accent, what am I saying? If I ask you a question, for instance, what am I doing? I'm not creating an inquisition, I'm simply asking. And that's why I can usually tell when most people think that confrontation involves conflict. And that's why they do not want to confront anything. That's why we say, again, followers do not like to confront. Leaders do not mind confronting because they know that confrontation does not mean, it doesn't have to end up in conflict. But in a follower's mind, it's going to end up conflicting with what I believe or the way things are. Not so. You understand that? Okay. Remember now, I hope you have a lot of questions for me, and don't wait for me to get to the end and we have 5 minutes for everybody to raise your hand. Okay? If I use the word answering, what am I advocating? Because in most cases we answer when people are talking, right? Except that we do not answer, we do what? Interrupt. Because everybody wants to get their point across, everybody wants to talk. So we do more interrupting than we do what? When interruptions start, then you move yourself away from what is called solution. You cannot have solution as long as you have interruption. And you do not get the response that you basically need in other cases. You want that response, but you're not going to get it because you're too motivated with what? Letting the person know how you feel, what you want, and so on and so forth. Or what you will do or what you won't do. And in marriage is not what you will do or what you won't do, is what the covenant allows you. It has nothing to do with you, everything to do with the covenant. What does the covenant allow you? Question. Come on, guys. This is not supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be easy. Let's move on to the next one then. If I say pondering, what am I saying? And when I'm pondering something, I'm going to think through this thing. Remember now, thinking involves what? Communication, yes? Intellectual analysis, it trends towards unity, cause and effect. It's a way of analysis, it's a kind of analysis. Maybe we should have this class in the morning when your minds are fresh. But lectures, are you learning anything? Because if you're not, there's no point in me going on if you're not going to learn something. We'll learn something. Are we? Come on. You learn something? Okay. Tell me what you're learning. All those hands that went up. Tell me what you're learning.
You know, it's kind of ironic that you said something. It's kind of ironic that you said something about as far as the wife repeating something over and over again. You know, saying the same thing over and over again, and you're saying, "Okay, I'll do it." You know, but she wants it done right now. But
She
you're
does.
saying,
Yeah.
"Yeah, this is what we go through." You know, and I'm like, "Okay, you told me 5 times already. I heard you." You know, and then she goes in the mode like, "Well, I'm talking to myself now." And I'm like, okay, well, kind of think it then instead of saying it out loud, you know, because I think you're talking to me, you know. So this is the sort of thing we go through all the time, you know. And I'm like, you only got to tell me once or twice, and I got it, you know. So it's kind of ironic that you did say that because it was important for her to hear that, you know. You don't have to tell me 5, 6, 7 times.
You know why that? Because it may sound funny now, but after a while, guess what? It won't be funny. Just go ahead, man.
Just to respond to that and what you said earlier, I don't think it's nagging. I don't think that's the right term. I think that in communicating what your request is to do a particular thing, I think that if the other person would give me a deadline or a window of time, then it wouldn't have to be repeated. So I think that goes back to communicating.
That's the point.
If you suggest something, then I need a window of time that we can take care of it, and then I won't have to repeat it, because most of the time, and I'm a communicator anyway, so I really like the dialogue about a lot of different things. So when I ask a particular question, just let me know in what time frame do you feel like doing it, or can we do it? And then that way, that cuts out all the additional questions.
Yeah, so that it would be good for him to say, okay, I'll do it later on this evening.
Right.
And that will settle it.
That settles it.
See that? Now you're learning that right there.
That's something that was left out and when you were discussing it, because you've said that something similar to us in men's fellowship about communicating what your plans are. So like that would kind of fall into that, because if you have in mind you're going to do something at a certain time, but you're not saying it, but you have it in your mind, nobody else knows, which causes it to be a conflict, because they're saying, well, when are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? But it's just here and nobody else knows about it, about the plan. So that's when it becomes.
And that's why you have to talk, because you can't lead unless you talk. However, even though that is true, you can't speak about every single thing. That is why it's going to be important for us to know our roles and our function. When we know our roles and our function, it helps us simplify a lot of things. When we talk about those roles and those functions, then you understand that I know mine and you know yours, and if we know ours, then we make it so much easier. And that's why the communication piece and not just talking.
This is a legitimate question. If the men embrace the do it now teaching, would that eliminate nagging?
It tends to, however. A woman may have 5 things that she wants done in a relationship. A man may just want 1. So if you eliminate that, yeah, it eliminates that nagging, but guess what? Now you go to the next one. That's what I usually find in a lot of cases. And if you eliminate those 2, then we go to the third one. So now you are pressured by all these things on a consistent basis. And that is why I do believe that the man may have or may not, and the woman may or may not have what is called deadlines. And the thing about it is, whenever you find the person who is more if I say more proactive in getting things done, and you're dealing with somebody who, well, I get done when I feel like, I mean, you got a big problem. Because one may keep a schedule, and on that schedule, they go, I need to get this and this done tomorrow, and they look at that schedule. The other person don't keep schedule, don't know anything about tomorrow. When tomorrow comes, we take care of that. And this person may say, well, then I need to get this done. But the other person who doesn't have a schedule says, honey, can you do this? Can you do this? Well, maybe I can't. Why not? Because I've got the schedule to do. They think now that the work is more important than them. The reason why is because one is task-oriented. They want to get things done. The other person, it really doesn't matter. And that is not good. And that's why we really need to be learning. Now, I see this in both men and women. Okay? And that's why those things need to communicate towards each other. Honey, this is what you see, because I'm telling you this, if you don't do that, you will invariably forget to do sometimes the most important thing. And when you forget to do the most important thing, then you're going to have what is called an argument. And the argument may lead into something else, and anything that causes an argument in a relationship, it will damper the affection, the passion, the spontaneity in any relationship I know. And you'll never have the ability to know how to be emotional when you should be. That destroys, I know, every relationship. Argument, confusion, and strife. That's because sometimes some people are more objective as far as getting things done and more proactive, while the other person is not. They just let things slide. Oh, I get to it whenever I want to. Or whatever. So they usually end up doing the things that they can do today, and the things that really need to be done today don't get done. And another thing is, that person is always what's called cramming. And most of us have been to school, and you know when you neglect to do your assignment, and down to the last week, you got all this stuff to do, and you start what? Cramming. And when you start cramming, what happens? You start losing sleep. You start to lose what else? You're shaking your head as if you know. Just what is it?
Michelle said creativity.
Creativity, spontaneity. What else? Oh, I don't have time for this right now. And it could be something that's important to the relationship. Yes?
I want to say this. You tell me if this is from processing this right. Sounds like then procrastination or nagging, neither one of them justifies the other. So like what I'm saying is, a procrastinator does not justify a nagger.
No.
Doesn't release them to be a nagger. And a person who is nagging, that doesn't justify a person to say, well, I'll just do it when I want to since you're getting on me about it.
Right. Yeah, that is true. And they are both what is called, if you don't have antivirus in the body, what do you have?
Virus.
They're viruses that destroy the relationship. They both are. None of these are going to work for your good. Absolutely none. Now, you know, whether you will admit it or not, that when you have a plan and you are more task-oriented, you not only get things done, you feel better about yourself, and you have more time on your hand. True or false? Okay, so why not do it? You undergo less stress. Less stress. But we create the climate for stress a lot of times. Now, I hope this will change, but I can only guarantee what I do, not what you do. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Now, I remember you making the comment, or you stating something in regards to the woman saying she has a good man because he does everything that she asks him to do.
But she tells him to do,
Tells him
not
to do.
asks him.
Tells him to do. Now, does this play into that? Because if you're saying that the man should go ahead and do whatever needs to be done, but then you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not good for a man to do everything he's told by the woman.
Well, number one, she's not his teacher. But she seems to think she is, but she's not.
So now we threading the thin line of doing what is asked of you versus doing everything that she's basically doing everything she asked you to do. I mean, we thread the thin line of you turning almost into the weaker vessel.
He's become feminized, is what I call it. Feminized. Do you know why that's the case? You know why that's the case? Because she usually threatens him with sex.
Yeah.
And her feelings, well, I'm not up to it. Or I'm not so feeling good. I just can't have this doing this now. And that's one of his basic needs. You see, because what? The man thinks from his hip down, she thinks from her hip up.
I like that.
Folks, that's the way it is.
Yeah, there's a thin line that now, that's why I'm here. I'm trying to figure it out.
Because you see, we talked about there are 5 basic needs of a man and 5 basic needs of a woman, right? Remember that? Yeah. Remember, anybody here remember what they are? You see, because she can threaten him easily with that. Real easy. And he thinks what? Gotta have that, right? Yeah? That's why love don't keep a marriage together, you know that? No. It's wisdom, knowledge, understanding. That's why Paul says, deal with them as what? According to knowledge. Is it? Does he use that word first? Or does he use understanding first? Yeah, does he use understanding first? Come on, in 1 Peter chapter 3. Come on, read it again. I'm going through my old notebook here in some places. What I'm doing with dismiss? Now? Yes. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to go over. Well, you get it done on Sunday. We'll go about this on Sunday. Okay. He says, deal with them how? In 1 Peter 3. Deal with them how? You're not responding to me. Deal with them how?
Dwell with them according to knowledge.
Right. So then there are a lot of things he needs to know that he don't know, right? Right? And then he says what?
Give honor to the wife.
And she's due honor, but they say, if he doesn't be with her according to knowledge, guess what? No honoring. And one of the things about a woman, one of the basic needs is what? Affirmation. So she wants to hear it, and he can't say it. Or he won't say it. Because what? Men are, and women are what? Men are emotional and women are sensitive. And she's emotional. And she's moved by what she hears at time, but then because there's so much disagreement and strife that what? He don't think she's that at all. So he ain't gonna say it. Okay, so say the benediction, sir. We did this some on Sunday. Okay, got an offering to go? Okay. Here's one.